Hi everybody, welcome to the Magic the Gathering, the MTG Deck Delve. Of course it is Friday. Let me angle that a little better, because that gives me a bit of better light there, without the background lights. But yeah, welcome to the next Friday. So it's Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that means it's time for the Deck Delve. And of course, if you don't follow me on Twitter, you didn't get to vote in what this week's Deck Delve will be. Those of you that do follow me on Twitter, hey, guess what? You got to vote on this, and it looks like the majority voted for my Merfolk deck. So we'll be talking about what's in my designed Merfolk deck. My last design deck I talked about was my Zoblin deck. And yes, I know, if you are a fan of my Zoblin deck, I don't have the deck list up on that link to there yet, but I do have the deck list linked to the last week's Commander deck that I put out. So I will have another, of course, poll after this week's episode, lasting till probably next Friday, that you can vote on to see what deck we're going to do next. So why don't we just dive right into this week's deck, of course, because it is my mainly green-white Merfolk deck. So, similar to what I did with my Zoblin deck previously, I do splash in some other colors. In this case, I splashed in green, which is a little appropriate, as those of you that are in the know of Magic know that green merfolks are all the rage now with the new set. Ixalan introduced us to green and blue as the mermaid colors, or merfolk colors. Because they're not just maids and men, they're folk. But let's dive into the cards and start talking about them. You are not choosing the right cards. That's odd. There we go. I don't know why it was showing chat. I'm going to be showing chat above me. So if you're chatting with me, your questions and stuff will show above it, so people in YouTube side on the VODs can check it out. Down below is all the support stuff. Yep. I have everything set up. So donations, subscriptions, bits, all that stuff is up. I have emotes. For those of you on the YouTube side that don't know a lot about them, we'll just do that in the order that you can get them for subscriptions. Those are my 3 emotes up there, right above my head. Alright, so let's start with Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. Now, when you cast them, you draw 4 cards. Card draw is an important mechanic of this deck because it helps accelerate some things when I keep getting new stuff. Now, the Annihilator 4 is always good, and the fact that when it would go into the graveyard from anywhere, I shuffle it and my graveyard into my library. So, yes, it recycles my own library. So he does prevent milling. And I don't necessarily have easy ways of discarding Kozilek, but if he's in my deck, that might be an easier way to cycle things around. It's just a little bit of extra oomph that helps protect against certain things. And sometimes you want a big old bad creature in your deck anyway. Hey, that worked. So Stunning Book Schoolmaster is the second one. When it becomes tapped, I put a 1/1 blue Merfolk Wizard creature token into the battlefield. I will have actually 2 of these in the deck. So I have the deck list. Another design deck, as I had with the Zoblins. 2 of them in there. And that's maybe not the easiest to do. I would either have to attack or somehow tap them in other ways. I have ways of getting them tapped for other things, which will then create Merfolk Wizards. So I tap it to other things. I might tap it to attack. I have ways of using this very effectively to create Merfolk Wizards. Ambassador Quatis. It's a Merfolk Wizard once again. Its big thing is for 3 mana, put the top 3 cards of... Target player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. So as much as I have protection with Kozilek against mill, this mills things. Mill is a term referring to millstone if you are more of a novice to Magic. An old Magic card, it was the first one to do this, where you paid 2 mana, you tapped it, target player put the top 2 cards of their library in their graveyard. It's the mechanic of taking cards from the library, putting it in the graveyard. Milling them is what it's become known as. And this is for just 3 mana, not tapping him. I can mill 3. So if I have a lot of mana, I could go for milling someone to death, possibly, if I needed to. That's why the Ambassador is here, just in case something like that is necessary. Deep Channel Mentor. All blue creatures you control are unblockable. Now, not all of my stuff is blue. The majority of it's blue. Most of the tokens I create are blue Merfolk tokens, whether wizard or otherwise. So, majority of things are blockable that I have for me. Deep Channel Mentor is good in that way, as I can make all those Merfolk I have just unblockable. Most of them. There are a few, again, that are exceptions. Guile. I like Guile. It's one of the elemental incarnations. The elemental incarnations are very powerful. Now, each of them, when they put into the graveyard from anywhere, shuffle into your library. It's not as potent as, let's say, Kozilek or any of the Eldrazi Titans are, because they shuffle your graveyard also. But this is another one that will keep coming back into your deck. It can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. That's the first caveat about it. So you need at least 3 creatures blocking it to block Guile, which is a pretty hefty matter sometimes. And then, if a spell or ability you control would counter a spell, instead exile that spell. Okay, so rather than when I counter a spell it goes to the graveyard, it gets exiled. But here's the other thing. You may then play that card without paying its mana cost. Ooh. So now whenever I would counter a spell, it gets exiled. And I effectively could just steal that spell. Now granted, since I'm not paying its mana cost, if it had some kind of extra mana cost or an X in it, that's not going to be helpful. But otherwise, if I countered a creature, if I countered an artifact, if I countered an enchantment, I can now play it and it's mine. Anytime I counter things. And I have lots of ways of countering things in this deck, which you will see. So Guile ends up being a very powerful component of ultimate control. Because as you saw with some of my decks, I like control of the battlefield when I can get it. Control is an important thing, and manipulating it to the best degree. Jin Gitaxias, Core Augur. One of the Praetors. Now yes, you'd say, well, just like the Eldrazi Titan, he's not a Merfolk. Why would you have him in there? Well, again, he is 10 mana, so he's expensive. He is a flash, meaning I can play him at any time. At the beginning of your end step, draw 7 cards. Okay, card draw in this deck. That can be devastating because I'd have to play 7 cards at very least the course of my turn. Though you will see I have ways of avoiding the difficulties of having too many cards in my hand. And then each opponent's maximum hand size is reduced by 7. Meaning all of my opponent's maximum hand size is 0. They don't have hand size. This can be devastating because that means things like bogs and other instances my opponents can't have to use against me on my turn when I'm attacking them or doing something against them. If it's an instant or sorcery they can use on their own turn or something like that, then yes, they're going to have to use it. They can't save those spells for the best moment. They have to use them now or lose them. This also means things like board wipes and stuff that maybe I have a couple things in my hand I haven't played. They're going to have to play it. They're going to have to deal with that. They're going to have to just unleash whatever they have or lose it all. And that's why it's forcing a point, which can be very potent in a lot of these games. Here's the first one I really want to do. Lull Mage Mentor. Whenever you cast a spell or ability, whenever a spell or ability you control counters a spell, put a 1/1 blue Merfolk creature token in the battlefield. So anytime I counter a spell, I get a Merfolk. Tap 7 untap Merfolk you control, counter target spell. With Guile, I'm countering, I'm stealing, I have a lot of Merfolk tokens. Now I have like the Stony Book Banneret, or some sort of Storybook Schoolmaster, and other ways of creating Merfolk tokens. It all adds together. Counter lots of spells, gain control of spells, etc., etc. So, where was I? There's Lull Mage Mentor. Lots of combos with that. We're not clicked on that, so we can't tab it. Get a drink. Marriagery. On the Merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1. Whenever you cast a Merfolk spell, you may tap or untap a permanent. So, combined with things like the Storybook Schoolmaster, where I tap it, play another Merfolk, I tap that one to create a Merfolk token. Merfolks are all bigger. Lots of combos with that help that playing more Merfolks from my hand also equals more Merfolks in play. Rootwater Hunter. We have 2 of these. 2 Rootwater Hunters. They're pretty simple, and you may ask yourself why. You'll see the reasons why they're very good here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Muffins. Oh. The 5 minutes I was up here with you guys, effectively, niece got into stuff, and my brother came home. It's always something. After being very good. Anyway, let's move away from problems of real life and just dive into some of this, you know, and talk about some of this. You know? Let's do that. Because it's fun. And getting a little fun in is probably a good thing. Anyway, so yes, it taps to deal damage to target creature or player. And that's pretty good on its own. 2 of them, it's 2 damage. It's pretty good, but you'll see I've added things in here which combo very good with this damage sources, which will help out a lot over the course of the using this deck. It's a little things here that will trigger it and make it very useful. Sea Hunter. For those of you that were around for my Zoblin deck, you saw that I had Mogcatcher, which for 3 taps, search my library for a Goblin card, put into play, then shuffle my library. It's the same with Merfolk. 2 of them, so now I can search for any Merfolk. Now, granted, I'm not casting them as a spell from my hand, so I don't trigger something like Regery, but if I really wanted certain Merfolk, I could just search for them. Like, key ones that I need at a time. Like, I feel like, I need the Ambassador right now to do its thing. Or, I need the Deep Channel to make all my stuff unblockable. I can find it, I can put it out into play for 3 mana. Stony Brook Angler. For a colorless and a blue, tap or untap target creature. Again, this could be, I could use the Sea Hunter, or the, Rootwater Hunter twice in a turn. I could activate the Stony Brook Schoolmaster to get a token. There's lots of reasons to use the Angler here to tap or untap stuff. Basically, it's giving me extra times for my other Merfolk with tap abilities, which is the good part of it. Stony Brook Bannerant. 1/1 Island Walk. Hi, Streamcat. You're free. Come up on. Come on. Yep. Hey, kitty. Streamcat's joined us, everybody. Dive me on, Streamcat. Merfolk are tasty, right? They're fish. Fish are tasty. Merfolk spells and wizard spells cost 1 less to play. So, if I'm playing both of them, that's a Merfolk wizard, they cost 2 colorless less to play. Makes them cheaper. Just makes mana efficiency, which is always a good thing. Making Merfolk cheaper to cast. Meaning, because I can draw a bunch of them, I can play more of them. Teferi, Mage of Zalfir. Again, we don't have a Merfolk, but it has some very powerful abilities. It's Flash. Creatures you control, creatures that you own that aren't on the battlefield have Flash. That means now all my creatures have Flash. That's pretty good. But that's not the crux of why I put Teferi in here. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime he or she could cast a sorcery. That's an effective way of saying, no, you can no longer play instants. That's the best way of saying it. You can only play spells during main phases. It shuts down opponents' Flash. So with opponents having Flash, shuts it down. Streamcat ran off then too. I think Streamcat's going to explore the house because Streamcat hasn't had a good time a lot of time outside and about. But Streamcat may visit us again before the end of this stream. Basically, it really hinders your opponents. And it dominates your control. Exerts your control. Wanderwine Prophets. Okay, champion a Merfolk. This means when I play it, I have to sacrifice the Prophets unless I remove a Merfolk I control from the game. I have to exile a Merfolk. Now, because I can make Merfolk tokens, I could always exile a token. I don't get it back, ever. The other one, I would get back if it was any other kind of Merfolk. I would get it back if the Prophet would leave the battlefield. But when it deals combat damage to a player, I can sacrifice a Merfolk, and if I do, I take an extra turn. Think about that now. If I have the Deep Channel Mentor, where this guy here is unblockable, moves on in, smacks my opponent. I sacrifice a Merfolk token because, hey, I do something to create a Merfolk token. Oh wait, now I have an extra turn. I can do the exact same thing again. And every time I take an extra turn, 4 more damage, at least to my opponent. Bam, 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 bam. Weeds them down. Ekes them out. Seedborn Muse. May I note that the Stony Book Angler, the one that could tap or untap, I had 2 of those in here. I have to remember all of them. And 2 Law Mage Mentors. So it was 2 of the Stony Book Schoolmaster, 2 of the Law Mage Mentors, 2 of the Sea Hunters, 2 of the Anglers, and 2 of the Hunters. I think that's all the ones that are 2 in this part. Again, consulting the paper on the side here because images and paper are separate. Seedborn Moves. Untap all permanents you control during each other player's untap step. It's simple and very powerful. I get to untap all of my stuff during each of my opponent's untap steps. That means I could have countered spells or attacked on my turn, and then untapped everything and be ready to counter stuff with things like Law Mage Mentor, or to activate and get more tokens using the Angler and the Schoolmaster. There's so many combos of tapping and stuff that I could get every opponent's turns. And because my design decks are more tapered towards multiplayer, think about that. How many times I get a lot of activations before it's my turn again. I get through all of my opponents as they're taking their turns to do stuff. Gacela, Blade of Gold Knight. She is white, but she's also red. And she's one of the few cards that doesn't have blue or white or that splash of green. She's, in fact, I think, the only card that I need red for. And I do have a couple of ways to produce red, so I can get her out. She's flying for a strike. That's pretty powerful. If a source would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent opponent controls, the source deals double the damage to that player or permanent. My Rootwater Hunters now deal double the damage. I have ways of using them more than once, so I can keep hitting and doing a lot of damage now. That's not the true reason I chose it, though. The bottom line is, if a source would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, half that damage rounded up. Half damage to all my stuff. That's where the power of Gacela comes in for my creatures. Protection. The aggression part, that can be good. But the protection part is really where this stands. The strength of it. Making sure my creatures, because I'm not getting them like huge or big the same way I was doing in the Zoblin deck. I'm not creating large zombie goblins I could send out there to crush people. No, I'm creating relatively small merfolk most of the time. Sig, River Guide. 2/2 Island Walk. For a colorless and a white, target merfolk you control gains protection of the color of your choice until end of turn. Because there's no tapping involved here is why I've left Sig in here all this time. Because for that 2 mana, I can give protection. A targeted spell against any of my creatures, I could shut down if I wanted to, when I wanted to, right away. Just do it. It's just little bits of control like that which really help out and put things together. And shutting down opponents should they try to stop you. And remember, this is, of course, single target stuff. It also means, like, if something happens to one of my creatures, I could protect it, particular ones that are key to what I'm doing. Over being a myth. Again, not a merfolk, but helpful in this case. As you can see, most of the non-merfolks are helpful to exacerbate my control, while the merfolk are more focused on some control, but also making more merfolk. So there's this idea of making more merfolk, while the other things give a lot of powerful abilities to help me do that. So, power and toughness equal to the number of cards in my hand. Okay, at the beginning of my draw step, I draw a card. I basically draw 2 cards on my turn. It's card draw, pure and simple. It is blue-green mana, so I do need 5 blue, or some kind of combination with green. But since I have ways of splashing in green, I theoretically could play this pretty decently. Yep, that's not good. Risk the Redeemed. I'm pretty sure I talked about him before. I think I talked about him in my Zoblin deck. He was one of the ones I actually splashed in there. I might not have. For 2 colorless and a white or a green, I put a 1/1 white-green elf warrior token in the battlefield. Okay. Elf warrior's cool. His big ability is the next one. For 4 colorless, and then either 2 white or 2 green, or a combination of them because they're the white-green hybrid mana. For each creature token I control, put a token to play that's a copy of that creature. All my Merfolk tokens I've been creating, I double them. And then because I have the Seedborn Muse, next player's turn, double them. Next player's turn, double them. I have exponentially increased my Merfolk tokens over the course of each of my opponent's turns till it gets back to me, and I have a billion of them. And Risk costs 1 mana to play. Risk is very powerful, and very good in this case. And because I can tap Merfolk to counterspells with Lawmage Mentor, I control everything now. Only spells I want to come out, come out. Consecrated Sphinx. Flying. Whenever an opponent draws a card, you may draw 2 cards. Pure and simple, more card draw. Card draw is a key aspect, as you've seen, that I have a lot of components which give me card draw, and this is another one that's very powerful. And this is one that can be very good earlier on because it has the may. This means if I reach a situation where I do have to worry about hitting maximum hand side and discarding, this being may keeps me a little away from doing too much. But if I don't care, each time an opponent draws a card, I get 2. Oh, sure. Control tab. Avasia, Angel of Hope. So she's a flying vigilance indestructible. That's powerful in and of itself. She's an 8/8, so she's already very powerful. Other permanents you control have indestructible. That's the strength of it. I make everything I control indestructible. And she's already indestructible to begin with, meaning that you have to exile any of it. This makes your side devastatingly powerful. This is effectively a win card in and of itself, because once your stuff is indestructible, and you can combine it with some of the other stuff, some of the protections, things like that, it just makes power to you. Asperia, Supreme Judge. A flying 6/4. Okay. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, you may draw a card. Another card drawing source. This one is if you become under attack, you can start drawing cards. And it's a creature. That means every time, like if my opponent attacks me with 100 creatures, I could draw 100 cards. Now granted, this deck, that as it stands right now, is a 106 card deck. So, again, both Zoblin and this one do need to be cut down a little bit. I would like to get them down towards 90. Usually I aim between 90 and 100 for most of these decks when I edit them down. But I might wait till this one hits around 110 before I call stuff. Because, you know, I think Zoblin's a little bloated more than this one right now. But we'll see after we edit it today. Because this is one that we will edit today. But Asperia is more card draw. Talarn, Sky Summoner. We have a Merfolk again. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, put a 2/2 blue Drake token with flying in the battlefield. You'll see I have going to be casting a lot of instants or sorceries, and majority of my instants or sorceries come back around. Not all of them, but the majority of them will either somehow come back to my hand, or will be shuffled into my library, or will repeatedly be cast in order for Drakes to come out. So this will create an army of flyers also. This is the solution to flying, one of the solutions to flying, because as you can see, Merfolk don't fly on their own normally. Control tab. Thassa, God of the Sea. Now technically she's a god, but she looks really Merfolky to me. Indestructible, she's an enchantment creature god. As long as you have a devotion of 5 to blue, meaning you have mana symbols in play, at least 5 of them that are blue mana symbols, it's a creature. Otherwise it's just an enchantment. At the beginning of upkeep, scry 1. Here's her main power, that's scry 1. Meaning I can look at the top card of my library at the beginning of my upkeep, before I would draw, and decide if I want to keep it, or put it on the bottom of the library. And for a colorless and a blue, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. So it's another way of making something unblockable. I have so many ways of making things unblockable to sneak in things like the Wanderwine Prophets. And that's one of the points. Because that ability, the unblockable thing, is a lot cheaper in some ways. Well, it's another cheap one. They're both really cheap ways of making unblockable creatures. They are mana effective. Because she's only 3 mana. And that's only 2 mana. So we're done creatures now. Those are the creatures in this deck. Let's talk about the instants or sorceries. Chronomatic Escape is the first one. I have 3 of them in here. And when I explain why I have 3, you'll understand why this is devastating. So until your next turn, creatures can't attack you. That's it. I play this on my turn. Until my next turn, I can't be attacked. Alright, that's pretty good. 3 of them means I could do 3 turns in a row, maybe. Chronomatic Escape, then it says, remove Chronomatic Escape from the game with 3 time counters on it. What's that mean? Well, it originally has Suspend, meaning instead of spending 6 mana on it, I could spend 3, exile it with 3 time counters. At the beginning of my upkeep, I may remove a time counter from it while it's removed from the game. When it has no time counters left on it, I play the card. Meaning every 3 turns, I can't be attacked. I suspend it. 1 turn, 2 turns. The 3rd token is removed. It gets cast again. It gets exiled again with 3 counters. So it resets right away. The same turn it went down from 1 to 0. It resets. Back to 3. I have a second one in play. I have a third one in play. I stagger them in such a way that unless you can counter them, I can't be attacked now. Ever. You can't win against me through attacks. That's the power of Chronomatic Escape. 3 of them, and you're virtually invincible. And since I have ways of countering your attempts to counter them, I shut you down. And I can also then counterspell stuff that you might be used to actually damage or hurt me or kill me. I shut you down. Chronomatic Escape has that power. And that's why I have 3 of them. 2 safe passages. Prevent all damage that be dealt to you and creatures you control this turn. Really simple. Really good. If an opponent attacks you with a bunch of stuff, I can block all that things, prevent all the damage to me and my creatures, so my creatures just kill off all the stuff that's attacking us. We call it a day. Safe Patches is very good that way. It's a superior Fog. Fog is always good, but Safe Passage only protects you. Fog prevents all combat damage, even your own creatures. This, you know, for a couple extra mana, it's really good. 2 Summon the School. Put 2 blue Merfolk wizard tokens in the battlefield. Okay. I can cast a spell, get 2 Merfolk. Tap 4 untap Merfolk you control. Return summon your school from your graveyard to your hand. What's this? I create 2 tokens. If I have some Merfolk already out, I can then bring it back, cast it again, and cast it again, and keep getting Merfolk. It just compounds and hoards itself into Merfolk, 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 Merfolk. Summon the School. It's one of the great ways I make Merfolk tokens in this deck. Beacon of Tomorrows. As we've seen, we've already have 3 spells that come back with Chronomatic Escape, Summon the Schools. This is another one that comes back. Take an extra turn, shuffle that into your library. Pretty simple, actually. It's another way of getting extra turns, other than Wanderwine Prophet, and this one shuffles into my library, meaning I could draw it again, or because it is 8 mana, if I would have, let's say, 14 mana, you'll see I have a way of both searching for it and playing it every turn. So I have infinite turns. It's possible with that amount of mana. Again, just because it shuffles into my library is the only reason that's possible to have infinite turns. Again, though, you know, with the Wanderwine Prophet, I could also have infinite turns if I keep making Merfolk tokens. I mean, there's plenty of ways to just take turns forever in this deck, and then just devastate and destroy your enemies. Counterbore. Counter target spell. Searches controller's library, hand, a graveyard, hand, and library for all cards of the same name as that spell and remove them from the game. That player then shuffles his or her library. I basically counter a spell, exile it, and all its copies from the game. That means, like, if you play Fog, I counter it, and you have no more Fogs in your deck whatsoever. Or whatever spell you were playing, if you were playing with more than one. 2 counterboards in this deck, just for such an occasions when I just have to wipe out something from my opponent. Wipe it out completely. Rite of Replication. Another one I have 2 of. So, put a token in the battlefield as a copy of target creature. I can kick it. Kick means I could pay extra mana. Now the kick cost is 5, meaning instead of 4 mana, it would cost me 9. Whew. But then, I put 5 tokens in the battlefield. I do something like target my Law Mage Mentor. I have 6, because I have now 5 copies of it. And, oh wait, I had 2 Law Mage Mentors, so if I have both out in play, I tap all 7, I create 7 tokens to tap another spell, which creates another 7 tokens. You can see that every time I counter a spell, I get enough tokens to counter a spell, with Rite of Replication using it. That's one of the main combos with it, but I have lots of other Merfolk that would be great to Rite of Replicate and get 5 more of them. I have 1 of Spellburst. It counters target spell with a converted mana cost of X, so it does cost you a bunch of mana. But if you pay 3 more, you buy back, meaning I play it, and it comes back into my hand. There's another spell that returns, and it's a counter spell I can use over and over and over and over again. Counter spells are a key aspect of this deck if you haven't seen that. Spitting Image. Put a token as a copy of target creature in the battlefield. You copy a token creature, but this one has Retrace. What Retrace means is I can play this card from my graveyard by discarding a land from my hand. If I have enough mana or land in play, I can start discarding lands to continue to cast Spitting Image to get more copies of key elements like Law Mage Mentor or other more powerful Merfolk. It's a way of getting more copies of things that I really need of the creatures in play. But this one could be any creature in play too, which means I could copy an opponent's creature also. The same with Rite of Replication. I could theoretically get 5 copies of an opponent's creature. This one I could just keep creating copies of them also. Now we're going to talk Planeswalkers, because I do have 4 Planeswalkers in this deck, actually. 4 of them. Benzer. So it starts with 3, tick up 2, exile target permanent you own, return it to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. It basically phases it in, puts it back in. We don't really have a lot of come into play effects with Merfolk, but some of the ones that I can combine with other things that maybe I would want it to be gone helps with it. It's not the best thing. For tick down, 1, creatures you control are unblockable this turn. Another unblockable effect. That's a really good one. His big thing is tick down 8. You get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell, exile target permanent. I buy back spells. Spells which suspend themselves and cast again. Spells which I can bring back from my graveyard. And spells which shuffle into my library. I can exile a lot of stuff if I really wanted to. Controlling the board once more. Narset Transcendent. She starts with 6. That's a pretty powerful one. For tick up 1, look at the top card of your library. If it's a non-creature, non-land card, you may reveal it and put it in your hand. Okay. So I can look at it. If it's a creature or land, great. I know what it is. I know what it is for when I be drawing it next. If it's neither of those, well, I can just be like, oh, look, I got Chromatic Escape. It comes to my hand. I can play it now. For tick down 2, when you cast the next instant or sorcery spell this turn, it gains Rebound. Now, sorry. Rebound, of course, being when you cast it from your hand. Sorry. Little frog in the throat. When you cast it, it gets exiled. And then at the beginning of the next upkeep, you cast it again, and then it goes in your graveyard. So it sort of rebounds out instead of putting it to your graveyard. And when you cast it again, you cast it from exile without paying its mana cost. And then it goes to your graveyard because the rebound activates if it goes from your hand. Now, is this going to great in this deck? Not necessarily. There are very few spells that this would really work well with. But something like Rite of Replication means I could cast it and cast again. Now, granted, I probably wouldn't be able to get its kicker off, but meh. Now, her big tick down, of course, is -9. You get Emelith. Your opponents can't cast non-creature spells. You shut down instants or sorceries of your opponents. That's the big thing I like here. Control. You can see how we continue the control theme. Koira, Master of the Depths. She is a Merfolk, and she's a Planeswalker. So I had to at least have one copy of Koira. The second copy of Koira, she wasn't good enough for this. She wasn't appropriate for this deck. So tick up 1, untap up to 1 target creature and 1 target land. So I untap a creature, I untap a land. It's probably my stuff. Tick down 2, remove the top 4 cards of your library from the game. Maybe a creature and a land from among them into your hand, the rest in your graveyard. Okay, I probably won't be using that. The untapped stuff is great. And tick down 8. You get Emblem with whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have it fight target creature. Then put 3 8/8 octopus creature tokens in the battlefield. Fight means it deals damage equal to its power to target creature, and it does damage equal to its power back to your creature. They basically deal damage to each other as if they blocked each other. Except things like Trample and First Strike don't apply when you're talking about fighting. And then I get 8/3 octopi. Now, is Koira stupendous in this case? Nah, she's not really. I have protections, basically, to keep my Merfolk from getting really killed by that fighting if I'm creating a bunch of tokens. But, because I'm creating a bunch of tokens, I could also use them as sacrificial fodder. I throw them out there, they deal damage, they murder stuff. Pretty simple that way. Jace, Unravelers of Secrets. Take up 1, scry 1. Look at the top card of my library. I can decide to keep it on the top or put it on the bottom, and then draw a card. Meaning I could look at it and say, like, do I want this card? Nah, go on the bottom, draw a different one in place. Tick down 2, return a creature to its owner's hand. That's always a good ability. It's tick down 8 is where Jace here shines. Whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, counter that spell. That means my opponent has to cast 2 spells before I have to worry about them casting spells. First one gets countered right away. That's mean. Let's look at our enchantments. Lash Knife Barrier. When it comes to play, draw a card. Now, I have 2 Lash Knife Barriers. If a source would deal damage to a creature you control, it deals that much damage -1 to that creature instead. And each one of these would apply separately. Meaning that means if my Merfolk would be taking 4 damage, the first Lash Knife Barrier subtracts it down to 3, the second one subtracts it down to 2, and then if I have Grisilla out, it halves that to 1, because I can choose the order that these things apply. Look at that. Shrunk it down. Or I could have halved it and then reduced that damage by 1 and 1. See? I could have done Grisilla. I could do that actually the opposite direction. I could apply Grisilla first. It gets halved. And then it gets reduced by 1. And then it gets reduced by another one to 0. So 4 damage becomes 0. Lash Knife Barrier is wonderful for protecting your creatures. Prevents a lot of damage. Martyr's Bond. I had this in the Zoblin deck. Whenever a non-land permanent is put into my graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a permanent that shares a type with it. If a creature of mine dies, an opponent sacrifices a creature. Enchantment, they sacrifice an enchantment. Artifact, they sacrifice an artifact. Planeswalker, they sacrifice a Planeswalker. The only things that doesn't work on is, of course, lands. But everything else, if I lose it, so do my opponents. That can help protect my creatures a lot. True Conviction. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. I mean, that's enough said. They deal both first strike and normal damage, and it's lifelink, meaning I can throw out a whole bunch of Merfolk, which will both do double the amount of damage they would deal because of double strike, and give me life. So, I mean, there's no downside to True Conviction. It's just really good that way. Charisma. Charisma. When an enchanted creature deals damage to a creature, you gain control of that creature as long as Charisma's in play. Rootwater Hunter. With Charisma, equals stealing creatures. With ways of untapping it, equals stealing more creatures. You see where I'm going with this one? Now, granted, I have to protect Charisma, which, not always easy. Charisma could be destroyed, but, steal, 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 steal. Followed Footsteps. At the beginning of upkeep, put a token put a token that's a copy of an enchanted creature onto the battlefield. It's yet another way of creating tokens. I have 2 Followed Footsteps. I float them on a Law Mage Mentor. My Law Mage Mentors increase by 1 every turn. It's another way that I can choose one of my key, very powerful creatures and keep hitting more of them. Which, granted, I have a good amount of them that are probably really good, and these I just have to choose which one's best. Law Mage Mentor is probably one of the better ones to put this on. Susang. For 3 and 2, shuffle your library. Okay, cool. For X, look at the top X cards of your library and put them back in any order. If you have a lot of mana, I can rearrange the entire library I have into whatever I want it to be. Susang is like Scry X, effectively, is the best way of saying it. Thought Reflection. Because card draw, as you remember, is a big mechanic. If you would draw a card, draw 2 cards instead. It's pretty simple. Thought Reflection just makes me double the amount of cards I'm drawing. If I wanted to draw, if I'm drawing 4, I'm drawing 8 now. Granted, there are some disadvantages to the number of cards I'm drawing. Think of Consecrated Sphinx, where I draw 2. If my opponent draws 1, I may do that. I would draw 4 then. It's a lot of cards very quickly. And my deck, again, is only so big. War Tax. I like this one. For X and a blue, creatures can't attack this turn unless their controller pays X for each attacking creature. So if you want to attack with, I basically would, let's say I play 5 and a blue. Each creature my opponent wants to attack with this turn, they have to pay 5 mana for. That can get expensive to attack with a lot of creatures. This shutdowns horde decks, or token decks, or weenie decks, things that shove a lot of creatures at you very fast. This can shut it down, because your opponent might not have enough mana to throw a lot of creatures at you. And 1 or 2 might be manageable. I don't think there's any doubles anymore. Mana Reflection. If you tap a permanent for mana, it produces twice as much mana instead. You double the amount of mana you're producing. If it taps for 1 mana, it produces 2. If you tap for 2 mana, it produces 4. So on and so forth. But it specifically does say tap. Aura Shards. When a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may, which is the important word here, may destroy target artifact and enchantment. There, because I can create tokens, and because maybe there's artifacts and enchantments my opponents have that I want to get rid of, Aura Shards, destroy them. Excuse me. I'm controlling more. Mirari's Wake. Creatures you control get +1/+1. That's awesome. Whenever you tap a land from a mana, add 1 mana to the mana pool of any type that land produced. So if I tap my land for green mana, it produces an extra green. If I tap it for a green and a white, it produces a green and a white and maybe an extra green or an extra white. It basically gives me an extra mana. And because of the nature of it, with Mana Reflection, I'm tapping a land for mana and producing 2. I'm doubling that 2 for... Thank you, Mirari's Wake, for just adding more mana to my mana pool. Debtor's Knell. I like Debtor's Knell. At the beginning of upkeep, put target creature card in a graveyard, any graveyard, into play under your control. I get my Merfolks back from the dead if you should somehow kill them. Or if things go into your graveyard, I get them now. I don't know what they are, they might not be helpful to me, but I want them. Maybe they're helpful to me. Mine, or resurrect all my stuff if you should somehow kill it. Wheel of Sun and Moon. If a card would be put into enchanted player's graveyard from anywhere, instead that card is revealed and put on the bottom of the owner's library. This is an important one, because now I can't deck out. As long as I have things like Summon the School or Safe Passage, I can just play them, put them back in my library. As long as I draw only a certain number of cards per turn, as many as I can put back, I'm fine. It also means that my graveyard just ceases to start growing. Chroma's Memorial. Probably don't have to explain this too much. Creatures you control have flying, first strike, vigilance, trample, haste, protection from black, protection from red. Red being burn spells, black being destruction spells that would kill off your creatures. This gives them 7 abilities for 7 mana to all your creatures. Chroma's Memorial is indeed very powerful. And we've moved into artifacts. Coat of Arms. Each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature on the battlefield that shares at least one creature type with it. Merfolk. Tokens, which are also Merfolk. They become big and beefy and crush your opponents. Massive Merfolk battle. That was an interesting voice. Dolmen's Gate. Prevent all damage that be dealt to attacking creatures you control. A pretty simple one. I can now throw out those Stony Brook Schoolmasters willy-nilly at my opponents. They're not going to die because they can't take damage, at least combat damage, and I get tokens. It's just a way I can, just in case, I can attack every turn. And then I have Seaboard Munes, so I can just untap everything every turn. I attacked you all out, and oh, look, all my stuff untapped. Oh, and they didn't take any damage when they attacked you. Planar Portal. Search your library for a card for 6 mana, put it in your hand, shuffle your library. That's the one that I would talk about using with things like Beacon of Tomorrows and get infinite turns. Or as long as I have 6 mana, I can get anything from my deck that I would want and need. Anything. Riptide Replicator. Now, it costs you X and 4 to play, so it is a little expensive. When it comes to Battlefield, you choose a color and a creature type. I would choose blue Merfolk. It comes into play with X charge counters on it. For 4 mana, tap it, produce a XX token of that type and color, where X is equal to the number of charge counters on Riptide Replicator. If I paid 10 mana, along with the 4 for casting this, 14 total, I'd be creating 10 Merfolk, blue Merfolk tokens. And with everything else that deals with Merfolk, massive Merfolk. Ooh, Dismiss into Dreams. Each creature opponent controls is an illusion in addition to its other types, and when this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it. So, Dismiss into Dreams, Rootwater Hunter, tap to deal a damage, target that creature. Oh, they have to sacrifice it, because it's an illusion. I can use Rootwater Hunter with Dismiss into Dreams to kill anything and everything. Alhamarit's Archive. When you would gain life, gain twice as much life. Well, that's pretty good. I do have some life gain in here. If you would draw a card except for the first one you draw each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. So my first draw in the turn, I don't get double the cards. Everybody with the draw after that, twice. It's another way of increasing the number of cards I have. Basically, for each one I would draw after that, I draw 2. I can be drawing so many cards per turn with this kind of combo. Orbs of Warding. You have hexproof. I can't be the target of spells or abilities my opponents control. That's a really good one. If a creature would be dealt damage to, if a creature would deal damage to you, prevent 1 of that damage. So not only does it give me hexproof, you can't target me. I make it that I take 1 less damage from everything, which is another wonderful thing. Just I take 1 less damage. So it's like the Lash Knife Barrier, but for me. Zendikar Resurgent. Whenever you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to the mana pool of that land of any type that land produced. It's the exact same thing as Mirari's Wake. It just adds an extra mana. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. So those creature spells that I want to cast a bunch of, give me cards to replace them. More card draw. I have a billion tons of card draw. You probably don't want to play all this card draw at once. Just a little bit of a warning when you're doing a deck like this. Not a good idea. We're on to lands. Seachrome Coast. I have 2 in the deck. I have 2 in the decks to plan. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or fewer lands, which means it's better to have this early in the game. If not, it just enters the battlefield tapped. It taps for blue or white. Still not bad. It's a multiplayer deck. I'm okay with slow. Wanderwine Hub. Comes into play tapped unless you reveal a Merfolk from your hand. That's pretty easy. Taps for white or blue. 4 of those. Reliquary Tower. I have 4 of these in the deck. You have no maximum hand size. Tap for a colorless. The big thing here is you have no maximum hand size. Guess what? Jazz hands. I have a huge hand. I don't have to worry about anything. Look at that. Big old hand, and I don't have to discard. Calciform Pools. You can tap it to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. 1 and tap it to put a storage counter on it. Or for 1 mana, remove X storage counters from it. And each of the storage counters you remove from it, you add 1 mana to your mana pool that is either white or blue, or a combination of the 2 of them. Basically, if I remove like 10 counters from it, I can get 5 blue and 5 white, or I can get 10 white or 10 blue, or some other kind of combination of the 2 of them. I'm very coughing today. Something's in my throat. Good thing I grabbed the water and the cranberry juice, but I haven't been drinking a lot of it. Cranberry juice. Good and good for me. Ooh. And it's the I like the 100% stuff, not the cocktail, because I like the tartness. Me personally. Calciform Pools. It's a storage land. It's a good storage land. Glacial Fortress. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control plains or an island. Taps for white or blue. 2 of the Calciform Pools, 2 of the Glacial Fortress. 4 of this one, Rupture Spire. Enters the battlefield tap. You have to pay mana when you play it. It taps for any color. There's where I get my red if I need it. I have 4 of these. Seaside Citadel. Comes into play tapped. Taps for a green, white, or blue. Pretty simple to what it does. It taps for 4 mana, and it taps for 4 mana that I could use. Sagiri Refuge. So 4 of these. Enters the battlefield tap. I gain a life when it enters the battlefield. Taps for a blue and a white. Gavany Township. 2 of these. Tap for 1 mana. For 2, a green and a white, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. It's a way of getting my creatures bigger if I need to. Eyes watering now a little bit. Man. Hollowed Fountain. I have 2. Enters the battlefield. I may pay 2 life, and it doesn't enter battlefield tap then. If not, it is tapped, if I don't pay that 2 life. And it's both an island and a plains. So it taps for white or it taps for blue because it counts as both of those. It's not a basic land, but it counts as those land types. Tranquil Cove. Enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, I gain 1 life. It's Sagiri Refuge with a different name. I have 3 of them in the deck. And then, of course, the basic lands, which is really funny because, like, when we talk about the one that has, like, if you have a basic land, it doesn't enter battlefield tap, it's probably entering the battlefield tap because I have 1 plains, 1 island in the entire deck. 2 basic lands. The rest, non-basic. Most of them tap for blue or white at the same time. Most of them do come into play tap, though. So you can see how it's a slower deck, and hence why it is more of a multiplayer deck, because multiplayer is slower.